I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus, and good evening, Bowling Green, Ohio. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my incredible co-host, Rebecca Wood, and together, Rebecca and I are about to craft an incredible hour of radio called For a Green Future. And of course, I don't want to forget about our friends on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome to For a Green Future, a show where we talk about ecology and the environment. And we talk about the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, and the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your coworkers and the birds and the bees and the trees and the fish and the seas and pretty much everyone and everything, because we are all tied up together on this fantastic planet called Earth. And we have a fantastic show lined up for you today. We're going to chat for the next 15 minutes or so here about this and that. And then we're going to hear from recordings I made during the Governor's Fish Day. A lot of presentations by the governor and other people high up in the Ohio environmental governmental organizations. And then a press conference at the end where I actually got to ask the governor a direct question. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful. Rebecca will then be talking about the cabbage butterfly, the most common butterfly you see. And after that, it's ecological news from around the world. And as usual, we try to get a mix of good and less good. But thanks for listening. And in the meantime, we've got some things to discuss. One, of course, we like to talk about global warming and the climate here often. And a weekend like this, a couple days like this with the incredibly hot, incredibly muggy temperatures seems like a good time to do it. I'm actually, I'm doing this from home because I got exposed to COVID last week, and I don't have any symptoms, and I just tested myself again today, and so far negative. But I was trying to, but I'm actually here, I'm kind of soaking wet, actually, because another thing that's happening this week is the Wood County Fair, which is a great fair and, unpaid promotion here. Go see it. It's a really nice fair. And I actually am helping out with the Green Party booth. And through some mix-ups, I was expecting to be indoors this year. Through mix-ups, all of a sudden we had to put up a pop-up and do a tent outside, which yesterday in that incredibly hot, buggy thing was really difficult. And one of the challenges of it was that I had a pop-up, but it didn't have sides. And so I thought to myself, well, I have left over from when I ran for mayor of Bowling Green. I have these two billboards, which are essentially just huge vinyl tarps with stuff printed on them. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'll use my vinyl tarp, my billboards. I'll turn them into a tarp and just use that to close up my my tent at the Green Party booth. Well, couple things I didn't consider. One was that the way it worked out with the grommets and everything, and once I got it all hooked up, it works fine. It's a good reuse of a billboard. But now every morning when I go to the tent, I'm faced with a 6-foot image of my head looking back at me. It's kind of disconcerting. And of course, we had tons of rain last night. So as I was tying the tarps up this morning, all of a sudden I got like the water had pooled on top of the tarp, and I got dumped on by about 10 gallons of water. And so I'm doing this show soaking wet because I didn't have time to come home and change and everything. So that's just how dedicated I am to get this show out every week, to talking with you folks. And hopefully you could talk with us too. I believe you can still call in, even though we're doing the show remotely today. Rebecca's at her home and I'm at mine. Call it at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And so when it gets this buggy, you might be wondering, where is all this water in the air coming from? And you might just be assuming, of course, it's the Great Lakes. Unfortunately, no. What has happened is the Gulf of Mexico has gotten so hot. It's literally 90 degrees. The water in the Gulf of Mexico along the coast is too hot for humans to swim in. 90 degrees, you can go into 90 for a little while, kind of like a hot tub. But if you are doing any kind of exertion, like if you're swimming, for example, if you're in 90-degree water, your body will quickly overheat because you can't get the water, that heat that your muscles are generating, you can't get that back out into 90-degree water. And so it's very dangerous. And it is so hot that the Gulf is putting huge bursts of water vapor up into the air, and those are being carried all the way up into Canada. And they are having, buggy heat warnings too, because it's not just the temperature. Yesterday, it was only like 76 degrees, but it was so buggy that it just felt like, like 100. It was terrible. And as I say, this is happening all over the eastern part of the continent, all the way up across the Great Lakes into Canada. We are being pummeled with Gulf of Mexico moisture. And that just drives home that point that it's global warming, folks. The more we put carbon in the air, the more this kind of thing happens. And it is, and I wish Rebecca's mic was working now, but it is a positive feedback loop because, of course, as we know, water vapor in the atmosphere is actually a more potent global warming gas than CO2. And so what's happening is that things are getting hotter, things are getting wetter. We're having more and more storms. We're supposed to have huge storms in the next couple days. And that, unfortunately, is coming at the same time as we're having huge wildfires. And so, speaking of Canada, I haven't updated you on the wildfire situation up there in a while. Right now, Canada is at 2.5 times average area covered by wildfires. They have 3,345 fires burning at the moment, and so far 5.9 million hectares have burned. That's an area about roughly half the size of Ohio has burned this year so far in and that's, as I say, in Canada, and as we say, that's 2.5 times average. And one reason this is topical for this week is that the smoke from those fires is being carried down, and in fact, New York City right now is covered in Canadian wildfire haze. And we've had that haze here in lesser or greater amounts for the past several weeks too. So if you've gone out, and one of the reasons you might be getting short of breath is not just the heat and the humidity, it's also the wildfire smoke. And so this is why it's so vital that we get off of carbon as soon as we can. And that means changing our technology. That means changing the cars we drive to electric. That means everybody putting solar on the roof as much as they can. Because unfortunately, the government, under the current administration, is literally taking us in the opposite direction. It's trying to put as much carbon in the air as possible, and that is making us more and more the villain on the international stage, because all these other nations that have governments based on reason and rationality, they are going carbon free. And China, unfortunately, has become the world's leader in that. We used to be the world's leader. We had the most solar, the most wind. China has far, far surpassed us and is making that technology available to everybody else too, so that other countries now are buying Chinese electric cars, Chinese solar panels, Chinese wind turbines, and we, who were once the leaders, are falling further and farther behind. And oddly enough, nobody wants our coal. Not even China anymore, because it seems like the numbers are still being processed, but it seems like China this summer has passed the point where they're generating more carbon. They have been increasing carbon even as they've been increasing their wind and solar, but now finally they reach that point where the amount of carbon that they generate is now starting to drop, and the amount of wind and solar they're generating is continuing to go forward to increase at incredible rates. And so for a while there, people who opposed to the U.S. doing anything about global warming were able to say, oh, well, look at China. They're so much worse. And just by the raw numbers they still put more carbon in the air than us. But now China's on a downward trajectory. China is putting less carbon in the air this year than they did last year. And with the amount of wind and solar they've added, that is going to accelerate incredibly fast. Meanwhile, we, under the quote-unquote leadership of Donald Trump, are trying to put more carbon in the air. And so China is going to be able to point to us and say, look at them. They're the bad guys. They're increasing even while we're decreasing. And that is not good. So that's kind of a big, heavy thing. We're working on it. Humans all over the world are working on it. And in places like California and Texas, the shift is happening. People are putting so much solar on that it is shutting down the gas of the wind, or the gas of the coal turbines and so forth. But I wanted to have a little bit of positive, a little bit of upbeat news on this in this introduction too. And last week, Rebecca talked about tree of heaven, which is a really aggressive invasive species, which a lot of people are having a lot of trouble with. We're having trouble with it in my own yard. We've been fighting it. And this past week, I noticed that some of the trees, some of the small saplings of tree of heaven that have popped up from the roots because we cut down or killed the main trees, some of them were covered in webs, and they did not look at all good. And it turns out there is a new insect that is attacking tree of heaven. It's called Ailanthus webworms, and these are caterpillars. They're tent caterpillars. They weave the webs and live inside this little web house that they build. And they're the caterpillar for the ermine moth. And this caterpillar was originally from South America, but down there they learned to eat tree of heaven, which is, of course, invasive down there as well. And because now they have this fantastic new food source that almost nobody else eats, as we know, the spotted lanternfly eats it, but not to the point of actually killing it or doing serious damage to it. Ailanthus apparently can defoliate an entire tree. And I've got a ton of them in my yard, and so I have stopped using the spray. I don't want to kill these webworms, these caterpillars. And the ermine moth is a really pretty moth. It's really thin. It's an interesting moth. It's very narrow, long and narrow. It's got orange and white spots it's orange with white spots on a black band that goes around them. They look a little bit like spotted lanternfly, actually, but they're shaped much differently. They're very narrow, and they're a very pretty moth. And so I don't want to, if they're here and they're eating the tree of heaven on my property, I don't want to hurt them with the glyphosate, because as we mentioned last week, glyphosate has problems. It causes basically causes AIDS in insects. It doesn't kill them outright. You can literally spray insects with glyphosate. It doesn't hurt them directly, but what it does is it interferes with their metabolism of a certain chemical in their bloodstream that is used in their immune systems. And that chemical, the lack of that chemical, means that they catch bacterial and viral infections and die from those. So we've stopped spraying. We're going to let the webworms try to eat all the remaining tree of heaven, and so that's kind of good news in my yard. I'm happy to report on that. Okay, another thing I was kind of happy about this past week is that they had the Governor's Fish Day, and every year they've had that, and I've discovered this year that they've had it for 45 years. I did not know it was going for that long. And so talked to a lot of people, recorded a lot of speeches and stuff, and so I got some recordings here, and I'm again going to apologize for the quality. There was a lot of background noise in the place where they were holding this, but I think the voices come through pretty well, and it's got some good information. So let's go listen to that interview now.
It is one of the things that I'm very, very proud of is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Mary Mertz, the team, everything that they do. Also proud, and I want to mention Brian Baldridge was somewhere here at the Department of Agriculture. But Mary's back and back, he's waving. But one of the things that we've really focused on since I became governor is making sure that we reduce phosphorus going into Lake Erie. The legislature, we have several legislators here. Guys, thank you all very, very much. You've done well. This is our fourth budget where we've invested money in what we call H2 Ohio. And we are actually making progress. It's measurable progress. And we're going to have to, whoever the next governor is, it's going to be important that governor and that legislature continue that effort. This is vitally important. We have, with the legislature's help, done a lot, I think, to really build back our infrastructure. We now have 76 state parks. I think with the legislature's help and the money they've provided, we've gone through and virtually every single cabin has been redone, brought up to date. All 10 lodges have been brought up to date. We've done things like having the fish cleaning operation. We have how many now, Mary? You got another one coming, right?
Next, we hear from Ohio Department of Natural Resources Director Mary Mertz.
Lake Erie is our natural wonder. I was telling a few folks, I just came back from the Grand Canyon, an incredible American icon. But what we have here that is comparable to that, I think, is Lake Erie. And preserving and maintaining Lake Erie is so incredibly important, and we are committed to that. Our biggest advocate has been Governor DeMare in helping us with the H2 Ohio work, which is all about cleaning up Lake Erie and keeping it healthy and vibrant and great for the fisheries, for recreation, for drinking water, for all those purposes. And we're committed. Every dollar we get, and I'll acknowledge, the budget to give us our agency quite as much money to spend on it, but I'm going to tell everybody here, every single dollar we got, we're going to make it count. We are going to make it count, and we are going to be creative and find other ways to fund this work because it's incredibly important. We know it's important in this area. We know it's important to the economy. $5.5 billion is added to the economy through the fishing activity up here along Lake Erie. That is important for Ohio. Our Great Lakes provide over 20% of the fresh water on this planet. That is a strategic asset we have to protect. And I'm proud of the team that does that. So we've also, We have 450 projects either completed or underway, or wetland projects, and they filter out the nitrogen and phosphorus, help reduce the algae blooms. We're seeing some progress, it's measurable, but in addition to that, we also have all of the wildlife benefits, all the collateral benefits, all the recreational benefits. What some of you might not know is we've also expanded the program with additional dollars to do work on Ohio's rivers. So we spent a lot of time with experts in the rivers field. I know our rivers manager, John Horn, who is also an expert angler, is here somewhere. But he's done a lot to lead our work on river litter cleanup efforts, dump site removals, collecting data so we understand what we're doing, focusing on dam removals, and protecting our most pristine rivers. So that is also a focus of our H2 Ohio work now. And it all leads to either the Ohio River or the Great Lakes. So I think that work is equally important, and we're committed to continuing that.
Next is Teresa White, COO of the ODNR.
Thank you for being here for the 45th anniversary of Governor's Fish Ohio Day. It's just a tremendous honor for the Division of Wildlife and ODNR to host this event, along with our partners, Charter Boat Association and the Shores Islands Research Center. But 45 years of celebrating Lake Erie, and more to come. More to come because of things like H2 Ohio, the investment in clean water. So we want to see Lake Erie thrive into the future. The walleye fishery has never been better, and we know this as the walleye capital of the world. We have experienced 7 consecutive years with harvest rates higher than every year in the 1980s. So a lot of people here who fit the fishing heyday from the 80s, we are beating the 80s right now. So this is the time to be out there fishing. We are on the doorstep of greatly improving our trophy fishing as the early year classes start to surpass the 10-year-olds, and most trophy walleye are 12 years old and older. So we get a really big ones, 12 years old and older. You have to survive out there a long time. We know sport fishing in Ohio is one of our greatest economic generators, as the director mentioned, bringing in billions of dollars to the state. We have nearly 1,000 licensed charter captains here, nearly 1,000 people on the lake who are earning a living by taking people fishing. And we also know from our different survey methods that we have over 400,000 anglers from at least 37 states who spend another 4 million hours fishing here each year. So a lot of time invested in this lake. So with all that information, we need to continually have good data, good research values. And we are investing, again with Governor DeWine's support in the legislature, in a new research vessel, which I have here behind me. It's being built right now. It should be coming to us later this fall. It is a 55-foot research vessel that will be delivered to Sandusky, and we are calling it the RV Walleye, Research Vessel Walleye. That is the official name. And it'll continue this proud tradition in the Western Basin of doing great research and collecting data for our staff to, evaluate everything. So that's, again, thank you, Governor. Lots of gifts here for our anglers and our sport fishermen. We also wanted to mention that due to a lot of diligent work from our staff, we had one of our safeguards is our annual audit of the Marine Stewardship Council Sustainability Certification of the Lake Erie commercial fishery. And we recently completed our 10th annual audit. And this comprehensive evaluation of our management strategy ensures that consumers are buying a product provided by responsible harvest policies. So again, really important things to safeguard the fishery. We continually work on, species restorations where we can, and we have been recently working on lake sturgeon restoration. So if you don't know what a lake sturgeon is, it's a fish that used to historically be here in Lake Erie and grew up to about 8 feet long, huge fish. And we're working with our different partners to grow some fish, release them. We've been releasing them since 2018, and the annual fall stockings of these sturgeon are planned for 25 years into the system, with hopes of those fish returning back here into Lake Erie as adults to spawn in locations that historically supported the reproduction. So again, partnerships come together to work on these kinds of projects. So we will have sturgeon releases coming up in the future, so look for those and maybe come out and help release them into the water. We normally release them when they're about this big, and again, to grow to 8 feet is pretty phenomenal. So we have already caught some 3 years into it that were about this 3 feet long. So So they're out there and they're growing. Along with Lake Sturgeon, we have partnered with the University of Toledo to assess the potential of restoring native sauger to the western basin and its tributaries. Access to high-quality spawning habitat was made possible with the removal of the Ballville Dam from the Sandusky River in combination with available habitat in the Maumee River. There's a high likelihood of successful restoration. So that's, some great work going on behind the scenes. And again, the director mentioned the Put-in-Bay hatchery unveiling. And again, thank you, Governor DeWine and the legislature for the funding to restore that phenomenal, beautiful historic building. It's going to be wonderful. I think everybody has to come out and see it next month. It's another great feature in the islands and tourism here in Lake Erie. So
Now, finally, is Larry Fletcher, president of Shores and Islands, Ohio, which is the building where the whole event was housed.
Kelly's Island tour, I know, was a special treat for you that went there. Outstanding glacial cruise now, of course, and one of those great 76, I think you said, state parks, so one of them out there, of course. And it's one of the 8 state parks that are in this Shores and Islands region in Erie and Ottawa County, including the largest, by the way, East Harbor State Park, about 2,000 acres, about 500 campsites, largest in the state park system. And Ottawa County also has the smallest in the state park system, the 1.5 acre Oak Point on South Bass Island, which I think makes up for its small size with an incredible view across the harbor of Perry's Monument and Gibraltar Island. Those of you, most of you know that Gibraltar Island is the home of Ohio State University, the Ohio State University's northernmost campus, Stone Lab. And Stone Lab, by the way, is the director, Dr. Winslow is somewhere, Chris Winslow back here, director of Stone Lab at the Ohio State College program. So they're celebrating an incredible birthday this year, an incredible anniversary. Chris was not there at the beginning, but they're celebrating the 100th anniversary of Stone Lab. So we congratulate Stone Lab on that momentous anniversary. And thank you for all that you and your team do to freshwater biology research and science and education and outreach. One program I'll plug quickly that I had the pleasure of helping work on and we promote is the Erie Pro certification program for Lake Erie fishing guides. This online course empowers participants to learn best practices, sustainable angling, conservation-oriented best practices. Fishing is, of course, just one of the reasons that Lake Erie is an incredibly important resource, not just for the outdoor recreation, of course, but for the ability to drive economic impact. There's a chart over here, if you haven't seen it, it shows the tourism growth of Lake Erie tourism, and over the years, it's a big dip in COVID, but then right back up where it needs to be. So we have data from 2023. We'll have data next year on this year's economic impact of tourism. But for 2023, that data shows that for the 8 counties that border Lake Erie and Ohio, total tourism-related economic impact is $20 billion. And that helps support over 131,000 jobs and generates $2.6 billion in taxes. And to me, that's the power of Lake Erie to drive economic impact, to drive visitation, and all that we benefit from that.
And after the speakers, the governor did a very short impromptu press conference. I did manage to get one question in, felt like a real reporter there, but here's that conference.
This budget, frankly, cut that some, but we'll make do with what we have, and we'll continue to really focus on it. We're making progress in regard to Lake Erie. It's a great place to fish. It's a great place to do about anything, and we're going to continue to keep that as a priority.
Why is it important, to keep Lake Erie?
Well, Lake Erie, first of all, is one of the great jewels that we have in the state of Ohio. Having Lake Erie is one of the things that makes Ohio, Ohio. The dollars and cents are huge. In addition just to the fun of going out on Lake Erie, you have people from all over the country who come to Lake Erie to fish. This is truly today the walleye capital of the world. This is the best place to fish for walleye. And so the economic impact in all the counties that border Lake Erie in Ohio is just absolutely huge. So it's important for us to keep the lake in good shape for many, many reasons.
Should walleye be the official state fish?
Well, it's a debatable issue, but I'm for that. I certainly will sign the bill if the legislature will pass it to declare walleye the state fish. It's the one fish I think that is distinctive in Ohio, that we are the best. We have a lot of, you can go to our inland lakes, we have a lot of bluegills and crappies and bass and catfish. So we have a lot of great fishing all over the state of Ohio, not just on Lake Erie.
Governor, you've been focusing on the environmental issues protecting Lake Erie. And on the federal level, we see some very basic environmental assumptions on things like toxics like mercury, asbestos, lead being questioned right now. What is your reaction as the leader of a state that's dependent on a clean environment to these sort of federal questionings of basic science?
Well, I'm no longer in the United States Senate. I spent 12 years there. I'm the governor of the state. Our focus on the algae bloom, the agricultural runoff in Lake Erie, that's not going to change. We know what the science is in regard to that. Nor is it going to change in regard to the lead pipes that we have still throughout the state. We're going to continue to work on those and reduce those and replace those. So these priorities, frankly, just remain the same. They have not changed. They're the same priorities I had the day I took office.
All right. Well, that was our interview. Hope you enjoyed it. Did the best I could. I hadn't really planned on being able to interview the governor at the end of that whole event, but thought I got a pretty good question. Ed, what do you think? 877-909-1007. And yeah, so one thing that they were talking about there is the idea of the walleye becoming Ohio's state fish. Ohio is only one of 3 states in the country that doesn't have a state fish. I kind of like the paddlefish myself, but I know that's a long shot. Also, the other first question was that he was answering as I started recording. He has slashed the budget of the ODNR, the Department of Natural Resources, by about 40% in the last budget, and so a lot of people are wondering about that. But overall, it was a pretty good event. I'm glad I went, and so now it's time to hear from our advertisers and patrons. For Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place is right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And, of course, we're also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they chose a membership level that matched their budget. And so every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we could afford to bring you this incredible show. And I try to, since we have an hour, I try to do things a lot of news stations can't, like give you direct recordings of the speeches that were at the event. I kind of wanted to give you folks a feel for what it was like to actually be there instead of having you hear everything filtered through me. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you appreciate it. And one thing that we appreciate every week is Rebecca, because she has a little segment here. I guess we're going to be talking about cabbage butterflies. So, Rebecca, take it away. Actually, unfortunately, we won't be hearing from Rebecca this week. Those of you who, I know the thousands of you who both listen to the live broadcast on Sunday and then go back and listen to it again as a podcast, are going to be disappointed. But Rebecca's report was lost to the ether. It did not get recorded, and so I'm going to try to recreate it here. So the actual name of the butterfly is the Cabbage White butterfly, also called the imported cabbage worm. It's a plant. It's a butterfly that feeds mostly on cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, other cabbage family plants. It's a minor pest in a home garden, but it's a big problem for farmers because once the caterpillar, which is called a green worm, gets laid on the plant, it crawls up into the inside of it, like inside the head of broccoli, and it does what caterpillars do. It eats and it poops, and so generally, if a shipment has green worms in it, the entire shipment gets rejected, and farmers lose a lot of money every year to the green worm. Now, the reason this is the most common butterfly, it's called one of the most successful butterflies on the planet, and one of the reasons is that they actually have 3 to 5 generations every year. It only takes eggs to hatch in 4 days. The larva, the caterpillars, mature in just 2 weeks, and then they pupate right there on the host plant and come out as butterflies. And this is why you see the cabbage whites from early spring to late fall. They're literally reproducing year long. I probably don't need to describe them, but just so you're sure what we're talking about, these are butterflies that are either white or they can also be yellow. They've got some black markings on the wings, wingspan of about 45 millimeters, and they are a plant or a butterfly that was originally from the European area, but they have covered the entire world. They're everywhere now. So the fancy scientific name for this very common butterfly is Pyrrhus rapi, and it's often used. Insecticides are often used to control it. There are a lot of things that eat it, birds and spiders, and there are not many parasites to it. There are a couple parasitic wasps, but they have not taken hold in North America. They're helping control cabbage white butterfly populations in places like Australia, New Zealand. But for the most part, around these parts, the cabbage white has its way. It is susceptible to the Bacillus thuringius biological control, that bacteria that you spray on caterpillars and they essentially liquefy. But it looks like they're here to stay. So back to the show. So now it's time for ecological news. And unfortunately, our first story is a bad news story. That is basically Congress is looking to repeal the Clean Water Act because, nothing says Republican conservative like polluting our waterways. They're doing it piecemeal. They're doing it different parts at different times. But the story in politicopro.com on July 21st, title is House Sets Vote on Republican Clean Water Act Bill. And they kind of stretched the whole clever acronym thing here a little bit beyond cleverness. It's called the Promoting Efficient Review for Modern Infrastructure Today Act, which spells permit. And essentially they are making it much, much easier to get permits to do pollution. And so it repeals big chunks of the Clean Water Act. For example, it exempts energy projects from having to deal with their water impacts. and it's sponsored by Mike Collins from Georgia, Republican, of course. It has passed through the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee. It went along party lines. Took no time at all because they're not thinking about any of this stuff. I mean, they're not looking at the impact of what the decision would be. It's just, oh, hey, here's something else we could do to help the coal industry and hurt the environment, and now that's their thing. So Democrats all voted against it, but they're a minority on the committee. So now it's awaiting vote by the full House. And one thing that they got rid of is they're exempting waste treatment plants and ephemeral streams, and they're exempting groundwater. They're exempting all those things from the Clean Water Act. So if it pollutes groundwater, it doesn't matter. All right, you're allowed to pollute groundwater if this goes through. And ephemeral streams, if a stream ever dries up, now you can call it ephemeral, and so you can have really quite large streams, but you can dump whatever you want into them. They also are getting rid of the state's ability to have higher standards. That is one big thing. We were talking with the governor at the fish day there. He was saying, oh, well, it doesn't change our priorities. We're just going to keep doing the same thing. So Ohio does have some clean water laws of its own, but if this passes, those will no longer apply. Also, it has this interesting thing, no backsies. So if they grant a permit and it turns out that, oh, wait a minute, you're killing everything in this river here, you can't go back and say, so your permit is revoked. Once a permit is granted, it's forever, no matter what the consequences are, which is a really that's just purely evil. Okay, we can't sugarcoat that one. I mean, if somebody's dumping in a river and it kills things, or like we had over in Cleveland, catches fire, and damages infrastructure, because burning rivers can damage bridges. In fact, they have historically in Ohio. If you're a chemical company and you do that, you don't even have to say sorry. You could just say, start building your bridges out of asbestos or some crazy thing. Also, coming up, on the EPA under Lee Zeldin is looking to redefine water. So, if you recall, Trump, back when he was campaigning, said he wants beautiful, clean water all over the country. And of course, all water is clean water, just it has pollution in it, some of it. So the water itself, H2O, is still, pure water. It's just you mix it with other stuff. Anyway, Lee Zeldin is saying that the EPA is going to redefine the word water so that should make it much easier to pollute. We don't know what he's going to do yet or what he means by that exactly, but something to keep an eye on. Next story. This is a story in Ecology Letters, Volume 28, Issue 7, back on July 9th. Title is, Storms Are an Important Driver of Change in Tropical Forests. And what it turns out is that convective storms, in other words, the big thunderstorms that have the thunderhead on them, that have, the air rushing in from the bottom and going up into the stratosphere, those storms turns out, about half of all the tree deaths, about half of all the deforestation that's happened in the rainforest in South America has been from the damage caused by that kind of a storm, because those storms have been increasing. And so this is one of the main reasons why the rainforest has become a net carbon exporter rather than a net carbon absorber. They did this study by plotting lightning strikes, because convective storms have a lot more lightning strikes. So they were able to say, okay, here we had this, using satellite data, we had a bunch of convective storms over here, and then after that they said, oh, and we have a whole bunch of trees down now in that same area, so the convective storms are wrecking the trees. Now, you might know rainforests normally have rain like every day. That's why they're called rainforests. But they don't have storms every day. In a normal climate, what they're supposed to have is this gentle rain couple inches a day that just sort of keeps everything really moist and beautiful and lush. But they're not used to having these huge, tremendous storms. Part of the thing is that trees in rainforests have very shallow roots. Their roots just stay like a few inches on the surface. So these storms are very damaging. And interestingly, they are having droughts now in the rainforest, but the connection between the drought and the deforestation is not nearly as strong as it is between these convective storms and the deforestation. So just an interesting little study. So let's follow that up with some good news. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Association, they just came out with a report that basically renewables now are massively cheaper than any fossil fuels. In fact, so 91% of renewable projects were cheaper than any comparable fossil fuel project. So fossil fuels are basically, it's looking grim for fossil fuel industry. The prices of renewables continues to drop in 2024. Price of wind and solar dropped 10%, according to this IRENA report. And basically what's happening is the rest of the world is leaving us behind. The rest of the world is heading off into renewables. Now, renewables are still the fastest growing energy source in the United States. Okay, so Trump has not yet managed to fully derail the renewable industry. It's going to hurt a lot more once the big ugly bills provisions get put into place, and there's no more tax incentives for putting up renewables. But renewables have gotten so cheap that even without the federal subsidies, they're probably, in most cases, still going to be the best choice for new generation, economically speaking, especially if you start generating power for yourself, like these data centers. You know, if they cover their huge roofs and parking lots with solar panels, that's going to be probably the cheapest way to power the new system. So there's some good news. Another bit of good news, our next story. Italy's Supreme Court allows climate lawsuits. This is a report from Reuters on July 22nd. In May of 23, Greenpeace Italia and an organization called Recommon, RECOMMON, they brought a lawsuit against Italy's biggest fossil fuel company, Eni, and they're basically saying that the damage caused by Eni's fossil fuels should be recoverable. In other words, because Eni, like other fossil fuel companies, knowingly put damaging carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, they have some responsibility for the damages being caused by things like the increased convective storms that are happening all over the world and in Italy. So Italy's been hit by some really strong, massive flooding, huge storms dumping tons and tons of water all at once. The new, quote unquote, the new normal, but unfortunately, even that's not really accurate because we don't have an endpoint for these storms. We can't say, okay, now, it's gotten much worse, but this is what it's like from here on out. This is the new normal. No, they're going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And today's massive superflood storm is going to be looked at, in a few years. We're going to look back on those and say, oh, well, that one wasn't that bad. The entire city wasn't washed into the bay like just happened to us. We're talking in a few years in the future, like 2029. So there is no new normal, but at least now what's going to happen is that Greenpeace Italia and Recommon get to sue Eni and hopefully get some of that money back that can then be used to speed the conversion away from fossil fuels. All right, next story. You will recall last week we talked quite a bit about the EPA letter that was signed by over 600 EPA employees telling Lee Zeldin basically stop lying about the climate, stop lying about lead, stop lying about asbestos and mercury. This is not the only federal agency where the people who actually know what they're doing, the scientists employed by the agencies, are sending letters to their bosses. The National Institute of Health had a similar letter sent to Robert F. Kennedy, basically talking about things like vaccines and other health things where what Kennedy is saying is not supported by the science. So the NIH and EPA, and now the National Science Foundation has joined in sending another letter. This one was signed by 140 people, employees. Most of them signed anonymously because what's been happening, of course, was when people put their names to these letters, they get fired. The budget for the National Science Foundation was slashed by 50% in the Big Ugly Bill. And so that is really hurting research, basic scientific research, the thing that gives companies an edge in global competition is our research. Most of it government funded. Like the internet, for example, was I actually was a grant writer once upon a time, and I wrote one of the first grants to hook a college up to the World Wide Web. It was considered extremely radical back then, but the whole World Wide Web and the whole internet itself were created through government grants, through National Science Foundation funding. And now that's been cut 50%. So we're not going to be the country that comes up with the next internet, the next revolution. So we'll see what happens to these NSF employees. Let's hope they fare better than some of the other. Two more stories, just a couple more minutes to get to. Next one, Politico on July 23rd. Steel plant in Vance's hometown trades clean future for more coal. And they're talking about the Cleveland Cliffs coal plant, which is in Middleton, Ohio. And they were all set to transition to alternative energy, to switch from being a coal plant to being a wind and solar energy supplier. There was federal grant money to do it, and now they have completely flip-flopped and said, we're not going to do that after all. And they started praising Trump and saying, how wonderful and clean coal is, and that the Cleveland Cliffs coal plant didn't even bother with the whole clean coal idea, the idea that you take coal and you mix it with wood pellets or methane, and so it has less emissions. That's what they call clean coal, even though it's dirty. Cleveland Cliffs didn't even bother with that. They just said coal is clean, just straight up coal, which of course is the dirtiest form of energy, apart from nuclear, which produces the radioactive wastes that last forever. But just another thing, it's going to cost thousands of jobs that people were going to be employed to make the transition. Ohio Middleton loses millions of dollars in tax revenues, and it's just a disaster for the whole community. But it's a great boon for the guy who owns Cleveland Cliffs because he's going to get a lot of money. Last story, and we're going to do something kind of positive here. And this is a story. Australia is offering free electricity. So Australia has gone so far into solar that in the middle of the day, they are producing much more energy than they need, even though that is the point of highest demand, because South Australia, of course, gets very hot, and people are running their air conditioners in order to survive. But even though they have an incredible increase in demand, there's so much solar that the demand on the grid is actually declining, and they have excess power. So from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., the utility in South Australia, AGL, is going to offer people free electricity. That's right. So what they're hoping to do is to get people to do the things that use the most electricity, like running your dishwasher, running your laundering your clothes, charging up batteries, for example, on electric cars. they want people to do that in the middle of the day because that's when they have the most power handy because of all the rooftop solar and all the utility scale solar. And so this is free electricity for 3 hours every day. So those people that are trying to convince you that alternative energy means higher utility costs, you can't get much cheaper than free. Okay? There is negative pricing. Sometimes, like in Texas, they've had so much solar that they've paid companies to take their electricity. But free is pretty cheap. And I just find it so ironic that here we are in the 21st century, and for 75 years, the nuclear industry promised us electricity that was so cheap that it was too cheap to meter. That was the promise, that it would be, everybody would just pay a small monthly fee no matter how much power you used because nukes would provide so much power. Solar is now delivering on nuclear's promise. Solar is now providing so much power, it really doesn't pay to measure how much you're using. And so I just find that incredibly ironic because we were fed this lie for 75 years by the nuclear industry, and all along the solar energy has been there. If we had focused our technologies, focused our efforts on the solar and the wind, we would already be in a carbon-free economy. There's nothing physical or economic or ecologically or technically that's preventing us from doing this. Literally, the only thing that's stopping us right now are politicians. It's purely a political problem. And so I don't really like to talk about politics, believe it or not. I would love to have a show where all I talked about was ecological principles and things we're learning about the world. But unfortunately, if we want to have a world, we've got to change the political makeup of our government. Well, I think that's about it. I'm not hearing my theme song, but I'm looking at the clock, and that's telling me we're just about there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Rebecca, for sitting patiently alongside. I'm not sure if you got to speak.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rebecca. And we'll be back next week, folks. Hopefully next week I won't be doing the show soaking wet. That was kind of an experience. This is Joe DeMare and Rebecca Wood, and we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting,